One of you alerted me to the fact that Apple has written an open letter to its customers, bemoaning the pressure they've received from the U.S. government to create a, quote, backdoor to the operating system of their ubiquitous iPhone. Now, as you may or may not know, as it stands now, the encryption on every iPhone makes it so secure that not even Apple can get into it without the permission of the user.
Now think about that for 1 minute. That does not make sense.
The encryption on every iPhone makes it so secure that not even Apple can get into it without the permission of the user. That not even Apple can get into it without the permission of the user.
That doesn't make any goddamn sense.
We've punched the pizza dough down, and it's time to sauce it up. Oh boy, is my mouth watering. You're gonna want to put a big dollop of that tangy red dead center on the dough, then use the cheese to shove it to the edge.
Oh, yeah. Sure, I think you should take a look at... Whoa!
No! What? What have I said about knocking? Always knock.
Whoa! Sorry, sir.
And what is so important that you need to interrupt me during my private reflection period?
Certainly most technologists appear to be. Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, appears to be. So let's just talk about what's happening here. Apple built the lock, but they didn't build the key.
Is a very bad start.
But what I think we're actually witnessing here is a gross and very self-serving abdication of responsibility, not a principled defense of our freedom. And it's very interesting that this is hard to see. And again, this is totally debatable, and my views of this may change as facts come in. But what I think is happening here is that we have a community in tech that has been powerfully swayed by the Snowden story. And there is now a bias against government having access, even at the end of a court order, at the end of a fully responsible process and a laborious one that gets a court to sanction their search for information. People still believe that the government has no right to search our smartphones. People still believe that the government has no right to search our smartphones. People still believe that the government has no right to search our smartphones.
Nigga, that's that bullshit!
How do you feel about that? How do you feel about the reason for that being that we wouldn't want anyone to be able to get your texts, ever?
Feels so good!
Right. And the other thing that I learned from this district attorney is that most technologists that he comes in contact with very much take Cook's side of this, that the pushback from the Googles and the Apples of the world has been ferocious. They simply do not want to build any tool that allows the government, even with a court order, to break into a smartphone. Of course, it's much easier for them not to build such a tool, right? If they don't have a tool, they can just say, listen, you are never going to embarrass us again the way you did during the Snowden controversy. We are simply going to be uncooperative with government. We can't unlock the lock because we never built a key. Go away. That is how they want to leave it post-Snowden. And I think when you look at the details of some of these cases, when you talk about how valuable it would be to have access to the cell phones, in this case of the San Bernardino killers, to see who they had communicated with, what other jihadists may have been among their friends. Okay. There's an obvious public interest to being able to do that. And it occurs to me that there are a few analogies here that might change the way people think on this topic, because what I think is happening here is that people are imagining they have a right which in fact never existed before the invention of the smartphone and could never exist in the real world.
Oh my God, 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 oh my God.
And they would never dream that it should exist in the real world. So for instance, do you believe you have a right to build a room in your house that is impregnable, okay, that only you can get into, that no one on earth, no matter what public interest could be served by doing so, could get access to that room in the event of your death or in the event of your non-cooperation? Do you think you have a right to build such a room?
Yes, I do.
if it were technically possible. Just imagine criminals and terrorists being able to build such rooms, and for everyone to feel that our privacy is somehow dependent upon our also reserving the right to build such rooms in our homes.
That doesn't make any goddamn sense.
Where we can store all of our valuables and incriminating bits of information. A giant safety deposit box that no one on earth other than ourselves can get into. I don't believe I have such a right. Okay, it would never occur to me to want such a right. This seems analogous to the right people think they have to have a strongly encrypted smartphone. Another analogy. What if you could take a drug that would make your DNA unanalyzable in the future? Right? So you could take a drug, and if you're a rapist or a murderer, you could never be linked to any DNA trace you left out in the world or on the body of one of your victims. It's not technically possible to do this now, but perhaps it's possible in principle. Can't imagine how it could be, but let's say that it is. Let's say someone invents this drug. Do you have a right to take that drug? It is your body, after all. It is your DNA. One pill, one time, the information in your body is strongly encrypted. Should it be legal for a pharmaceutical company to produce that drug? I don't think so. I think, on balance, only harm would come of that, and the harm would be immense, right?
That sounds kind of dum 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 dum.
The people who would benefit would be criminals. What benefit could you and I derive from that? So in the case of the smartphone, again, we're talking about a court-ordered search of a phone that is associated with either a known criminal or a victim of a murder. This is the ability that the government wants. And Apple is telling us that it is impossible to grant them this without a terrible breach of security generally. Now, I don't buy that. It seems reasonable to expect that Apple could have security on its side, certainly on par with the level of information security we rely on elsewhere to transact all of our business online. Apple could maintain the backdoor at the highest level of security on its own side. And they could get into your phone in the same way that any other company can get into your online accounts. Your bank can get into your banking details. They know your credit card number. Apple is trading on a kind of paranoia here that I think many people feel after Snowden, but it doesn't seem reasonable. Again, I will grant that information security is hugely important, and cybercrime and identity theft are huge problems, and we don't want governments doing things that are illegal, and we should figure out what should be legal and hold our governments to those laws. Okay, all of that is true, but we're talking about a very unique circumstance where Apple is intentionally building a zone of privacy that is currently unthinkable in the real world.
How stupid are you?
And they're declaring that we will all suffer mightily if they build any key to the lock they've put on the door. They're saying they can't possibly keep the key to themselves, whereas really I think they just don't want the responsibility of doing so. Again, these thoughts are only half formed, but I think it's an incredibly interesting issue. And if you guys can think of who would be good to talk to on the podcast on this topic, that might be an interesting conversation. Welcome to the Waking Up Podcast. This is Sam Harris. Okay, well, I have a few stray points to address before I get started. The response to my initial thoughts about the Apple FBI controversy was fairly crazy. That turned out to be a much bigger story than it was when I recorded that last podcast. If I had waited a few days, I would have had a better sense of just how heated a controversy I was wading into. Now, first I should say that many of you, in the process of telling me what an idiot I am, say rather nice things like you usually agree with everything I say and you find areas of disagreement even more valuable. You say you love this podcast because it makes you think, and in ways that you don't always find comfortable. And that discomfort is what you value most in the end. Now, I love that. Okay, that's great. If I push your opinions around and some of them don't budge, perhaps I didn't need to. You might be right and I might be wrong. That's why I talk about these things. I'm trying to reason in public. I don't have all my ideas worked out in advance. And as I thought I made clear about the Apple FBI controversy, I was presenting my gut reaction on this topic and also waiting for more information to come in. And more information has come in. In fact, many of you sent me some very good articles and emails, and some argue that there are practical impediments to Apple's complying with the government's request that I hadn't heard about. So I still don't know what I think about this specific case. And it could be that the mere existence of strong encryption is going to make many of these concerns moot, which is to say there will be impregnable zones of privacy whether we like it or not. It's a little bit like what 3D printing might do to hopes of gun control. If you can print a fully functioning gun at home, having merely downloaded a file from the internet, well then the genie just might be out of the bottle forever. But I'd like to make a few general observations in response to those of you who are absolutely sure that Apple shouldn't cooperate with the government in any way. And you're absolutely sure that this isn't a complicated issue, ethically speaking. Because I've heard from many of you. Okay, you are the same people who have no doubt that Edward Snowden is a hero, pure and simple, because you think his contribution to the welfare of humanity is unambiguous and entirely good. Okay, now, whether you know it or not, you are part of a new religion. And I'm going to give you a name for it, which you should feel free to use. You are part of the cult of privacy. Now, once again, I'm not minimizing the problem of information security. Let me say that again. I am not minimizing the problem of information security. But if you believe that your texts and emails and photos and medical records and browser history are so precious and sensitive that no human purpose could justify their being viewed by others without your consent, no court order, no reasonable suspicion could justify government intrusion into your privacy, you are a devotee of this new faith.
You know, man, you just stacking stupidity on top of stupidity.